Hey guys, you may have heard me mention this Sentinel 430 set in some of my previous videos. Well, I really didn't have any intention of working on this today, but one of my YouTube friends sent me a link to an auction on eBay for a TV chassis that has a picture tube that would work in this set. I got this set over a year ago and it's pretty much just been sitting here ever since. I did power it up once and I got some hum out of the audio and that was it, no picture or anything. I have tested the picture tube, but back then I only had one kind of crude picture tube tester, and it tested kind of weak, and there was a little bit of a bluish glow in the neck. Well, last night I tested this again with my fairly new Sentinel picture tube tester, and it actually tested not too bad after I let it sit for about an hour. And I fiddled around with this magnet up here, and I noticed that the blue glow seemed to follow that magnet, and when I popped this off, it went away entirely. So what I had thought was an indicator of a gassy tube, I think it's just a consequence of an effect of voltages on glass in a vacuum, and this tube might actually be okay. That auction's up in about 3 days, and so far there aren't even any bidders on it, but the shipping is pretty steep because these picture tubes are really heavy. This is the first generation of rectangular picture tubes. All my previous videos and most of my other sets, they're all round tubes, either 10 or 12 inch. This is actually a 16-inch rectangular. And part of the reason they're rare too is that shortly after these came out, all the sets went to 17-inch, and there's plenty of 17-inch rectangular tubes out there. Not too many 16-inch. So actually this is the first one I've ever seen on sale. So, you know, it's a bit of money. You know, if I'm the only bidder, maybe I can get it for about 70, 80 bucks, something like that, and I have to keep my fingers crossed so the tube doesn't break and all the rest of it. So I'm going to check this one out. It's been a while since I pulled this chassis up, but I do remember that this thing is incredibly heavy. And I think it's because of this picture tube, because of this early rectangular design. You know, a rectangle is not as strong as a circle when it comes to like a glass vacuum, so I think these have extra thick glass on them. Anyways, so I'm going to try to pull this out. I cleared some space on my workbench, and then I'm hoping that I can just bypass the few electrolytics in here. There's one over here on the power supply. This is just a single chassis, unlike those Admirals, so the power transformer's right here, rectifier tubes right here, filter caps right here. Now I know there's another electrolytic hiding around somewhere. It might be underneath. This is a pretty simple set, so I'm hoping in just a few hours I can just tack on some new caps underneath, disconnect these, enough to see if this picture tube's any good or not. And even if the tube's bad, I do have a high voltage probe now, so I can check to see if there's any voltage coming out of this. So hang on and I'll see if I can get this out on the workbench. Okay, here it is up on the workbench. Actually wasn't too bad. As you can see, it's a huge rectangular picture tube, very brightly luminized on the inside of the glass. Unlike my other black and white sets I've shown you, which run at about 9,000, this runs at about 14,000, so I think a little bit more serious about protecting the high voltage circuitry. I started taking it apart, quite a few screws holding it on, and here's the high voltage lead I pulled out, which is got rubber on it to protect it. But I can't figure out how to get the rest of it apart. It's got this wire support going down here, which doesn't come off easily. It's going through a grommet. I think I can maybe pry this wire open. But then it gets worse. It goes through this piece of fiber board. It's routed through 2 holes on that, like threaded through it. And then there's a wire staple holding it on that's twisted over on this back side. And then it's soldered on down there, so... And this box is just all one solid rectangle. So I can't pull this box off. And unfortunately, there's a fuse in here, which may very well be blown. It's just like in those Admiral sets I showed you. This is to protect all this stuff from burning out. Well, anyways, it's quite dirty down in there, so I'd really like to be able to get down in there. Plus there's 4 tubes down there, and it's hard to get at them without getting this box off. So I think I'll puzzle over that for a little while. And in the meantime, I will check out the rest of the set. I already looked at the schematic and it looks pretty straightforward. Here's the other electrolytic I need to bypass. This audio output tube. There's one tube, it still says Sentinel. Here's this, the Sentinel factory was in Evanston, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago. So, oh, and I got this set from a nephew of the woman, I should say. I bought this set from the nephew of a woman that actually worked in the plant during World War II when Sentinel made a lot of radios for the Army. And she got this set and went, and they lived in Skokie, which is right next to Evanston, and now I have it. So I don't think this set's ever been more than about 15-20 miles from where it was made, which accounts for it being in very good condition, I think. Oh, another neat thing about this chassis is that it's copper plated, like a lot of the early Motorola sets were. I'll put down the camera for a second and tip the chassis over and show you what's underneath. Okay, yeah, it's nice and clean, but I can see there's a bunch more caps under here. These black guys with the little stripes on them, they're called Black Beauties or Bumblebee caps. They're the same as the old crappy wax capacitors, but what they did is they just encased it in some black plastic and painted stripes on it, but they're just as unreliable, just as prone to failure. And there are a number of more electrolytics lurking under here, like this yellow guy, another yellow guy, this one here. One here, one here. More Bumblebee Black Beauties, some wax caps, made in Chicago. But it is all nice and open point wiring, so I think I could blow through this stuff pretty quick, assuming I've got all these on hand. Let's see if I can twist one of these around. Huh, that's weird. I'm used to all these capacitors being pretty high voltage in these old sets, like 200 to 600 volts. This is actually 1,000 microfarads and only 5 volts. And, well, that one's 450 volts, so some of these are high voltage. 200 volts, 3 volts. Surprised our voltage is that low in here. Yeah, so in addition to the 2 metal can caps on the top side, at the very least I want to take out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these big yellow jobbers. These 2 orange electrolytics, and I'll try slow power up with that and see where it gets me. Like I said, I have actually turned this set on before. It was over a year ago. Nothing bad happened, so I'm not too concerned. Plus, I'll use Variac and a fuse. Power resistor. It looks like there's an old repair. At least I assume it's an old repair. It looks like whoever it was. There's probably used to be a big power resistor in here, but he probably either didn't have the right value or the right wattage, so they used 4 resistors in parallel and series combination to make one big capacitor. Or sorry, one big resistor, I mean. That looks a little worrisome. That's another resistor, but this one's... Looks like it's seen some heat there with a little bit of bubbling on the wax. Maybe a little blackening on one end. To pull out the schematic to see what that is for sure. Oh, shame on these. Geez, look at these guys. Seen this happen before too. These are ceramic disc capacitors. They look like they're diseased. But they're probably okay. It's probably just the wax deteriorating and bubbling from heat over the decades. Because ceramic capacitors are probably the least likely components to fail, because it's literally like a piece of ceramic plate, like a coffee mug or a plate with some metal on either side. There's not a whole lot that can go bad with them, other than like physical damage, like them cracking. All right, enough of me babbling. I'll start pulling out some caps, and hopefully I've got all these values on hand.